you've had your fair share of battles in life, adversity. Can you talk about from the day you found out how old you were to kind of where you're at now and just what that's been like for your journey?
Yeah, sure. So I just turned 17 the first time I was diagnosed. I very much had like the normal 17-year-old attitude. It was the whole world is mine, right?
Hmm.
I wasn't even feeling necessarily that sick. About a month prior, I just basically kind of people thought got the flu. No reason. I'm really good to the doctor, and just I couldn't get healthy. And then one day I was just running and I collapsed
Hmm.
and went to the hospital. A week and a half, 2 weeks later, testing, went into my first bone marrow biopsy, and within a couple of days, had found out I had leukemia. Um, I think that process is I didn't even have a good comprehension of like how this could happen, because as a 17-year-old kid, you're like you don't even think of that. Like at the time,
Hmm.
my grandparents, I remember had cancer at one point, but like I didn't even understand it as a kid. Like
Hmm.
it's just like, oh, you know grandma was sick. And I think that process in general was, it became pretty scary the first time you go through chemotherapy, right? Like you get told the information, but you're so young, it's really hard to understand the situation that you're in. But luckily, they had taught it pretty early. So I went through almost 2.5 years of treatment, went into school. Luckily, so my treatment there was done between Moffitt Cancer Center in Tampa and Stanford Medical Center, which is where I did my undergrad.
Oh,
And
okay.
so luckily got the best treatment in the world, I would say, from that. But through that, like a big part of my story is I was raised in a Christian household. I went to Sunday school. I listened to all the Veggie Tale movies to Heart's Delight. I memorized but
Veggie
like that.
Tales.
Yeah, but the faith wasn't mine. But yeah, like
Yeah.
everyone I talked to, it's like the stereotypical Sunday school kid got Veggie Tales. That's what
Yeah.
it's like.
Yeah. Yep.
It's it's relatable.
Oh, yeah.
But so I go through that, right? And I finish up school, and the desire to play baseball always was there. But I mentioned faith just because by that time I'd gone off the rails. I left the house, and the faith wasn't mine.
Hmm.
You would think going through something that difficult, like what are you gravitating to? For me, I gravitated to material, right? Like I
Hmm.
actually became very angry at the world
Hmm.
through that experience. So flashed a couple years later, I'm 24 now, healthy. I've had my career. I'm working in tech actually
Hmm.
at that point. And I make a comeback. For some reason, I was playing in an adult league, and I'm like, hey, I can still do this pretty well. I tried out, got an indie ball tryout, and
Hmm.
within a week of that, like some symptoms came back, like
Hmm.
to the point where so I get diagnosed for my second time in my life with cancer, and it's the other
Jeez.
blood cancer, lymphoma, specifically non-Hodgkin. So now I'm
Wow.
like battling this, and I'm like, hey, like what is going on here? And I'm
Yeah.
still walked away from my faith. I'd never say I was an atheist. I would just say I was angry at God,
Yeah.
probably for many years of my life. So I go through, it's not much to go through, but like same treatment phase again. This didn't phase me. I wasn't scared. If anything, like I burned it, like I very much blamed my parents for some reason
Mm.
because I found I was a military brat, grew up over, and they were talking about like my exposure into paint, lead paint, right? Especially
Hmm.
on these military bases
Hmm.
when I grew up. So funny enough, and as irrational as it sounds now, I blame my parents.
Yeah.
And like I was angry at them, and they helped me through treatment, right? The insurance was good, but I go through that, and you at that point of that experience, I'm like, hey, like maybe there's some changes I need to make in my life. And you would think at this point I go and make these changes. In fact, I go completely opposite. If there was more of a spectrum of materialism and walking away from faith, at this point in my life I did. And at this point I would say, like I said, I never would have called myself an atheist, but if you had asked me if God was real at that point in my life, I would have rejected everything. In fact, there were many times I had conversations and it became a contentious battle between my parents and I. So they'd always want to talk with me about church, right? Every conversation to the point where I just cut it off, right? And
Hmm.
I just wouldn't talk with them. I wouldn't go home for meals at holidays or anything like that. I wouldn't even pick up my phone on my birthday when someone would call, just because like
Mm.
for those couple years after that. But now flash forward, I'm actually living in Seattle at
Oh,
this point at
okay.
29 years old, and I'm
Okay.
walking across in Pioneer Square,
Hmm.
and I get hit. Pioneer Square is not a lot of drivers pay attention. I get hit by a car. No
What?
joke. I go up, I wake up in the hospital. I have no broken bones, no internal bleeding, no ribs, like nothing wrong, right? Like if I was hit by a car, like I went up, obviously, like my thing I'm walking away is a concussion. And
Wow.
because of that, they're taking blood samples and things like that. So they tell me like, hey, I've got really high like white blood cell count. Asked if I felt sick because they couldn't see anything. White blood cell doesn't. For anyone watching, if you go to WebMD and you're sick, you always have cancer. It always
There's
says
some truth to
it.
that. Yeah.
But white blood cell count doesn't mean you have it. But because of my history, they're like, hey, well, like you may want to just go get looked at. And I
Hmm.
feel fine. Like I don't even have any symptoms of my knowledge. And I'm like, okay, like I'll go get looked at. Honestly, for that year, I had missed all my checkups. So usually you go for like a biannual checkup, right? Scan
Yep.
like, and I missed it. I still am off the beaten path here, right? I've walked away from my
Hmm.
faith. Like it's a big part of this. I'm as materialistic as you get. I was working, I've been blessed enough at that point to partially own a tech startup. Like
Hmm.
I'd done well in the world's eyes. Well, I would feel like how Jesus would preach it.
Hmm.
But anyways, within a week later, uh, I'm sitting in a hospital room, and literally they say, "Hey, do you want to call your parents, or do you have anyone with you?" And I get told that I've got very advanced. So with AML, they don't stage it; they give you a percentage, which
Okay.
is acute myeloid leukemia. So I was at 90% AML, which is pretty far into the equivalent of like a stage 4 of any
Oh my
cancer,
goodness.
like riddled with it. And although the only side effect I had was, and I didn't even realize this was a symptom. For that past 2, 3 months prior, I would go blind suddenly. And I thought
Mm.
I got diagnosed with ocular migraines. And I tell these doctors, like, I don't think it's normal for me to just be driving. And like, it's like if you were looking at a TV screen that goes fuzzy,
Uh-huh.
that's what would happen in my eyes.
Oh my
Like, just
goodness.
completely. So it wasn't even safe for me to be driving, right? So, but that was actually like a big symptom of it. Um, but anyway, so we get to it. It's terminal. Like
Oh
it's
my.
October of 2019, and I get told like, hey, like, you know, let's start looking at quality of life treatment. I end up going to a hospice care. Like that's how dire it was. I was sleeping 20 and 21 hours out of a day.
Oh my
Still
goodness.
not walked back to my faith yet, by the way. So
Yeah.
we get to December, and things still are not going well. Like it's progressing as they said it would. I've had this very gone from pretty healthy, besides the ocular migraines, to just very much a fast decay. Like your body is literally essentially dying from the inside, right?
Wow.
I'm in this hospice in Tampa, and my parents are around me, and I think to myself, like, how could this happen? Like this is the first time, like, and I've been through it twice, but like this was it, and I can't tell you why. And this isn't like some miraculous story, but like on the 23rd December when my parents left, like I just kind of faked sleep while they were there because at some point I just didn't want to talk and I wanted to
Hmm.
be seem
Hmm.
strong for them.
Hmm.
And I said like God, like I don't understand, but like I've been horrible and I've sinned and I just need to know though that when I die that I'm going to go to heaven. And I had this like conversation with him, and that moment I said like I'd never up until that point, like I grew up in something, like they say raise your hand, you want to like commit your life to Christ. I did it because everyone did it, and I was like, hey, I want to go to the podium with
Yeah.
everybody.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
want
Yeah.
to be back here. And at that point, I said like I commit everything to you. I don't care
Mm.
if I have minutes or I have days or I have months. Like I want to commit my life to you. And funny enough, it was like, at first it was like I was scared to die. Like,
Yeah.
hey, I
Yeah.
don't want to go. But
Yeah.
then it
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
like, let me, like, I realized this was going to happen. And you would think that you hear stories sometimes of people doing that and like there's some physical change and it doesn't happen like that for me. In
Yeah.
fact, it gets worse. But the good thing is I have peace knowing that when my head hits the pillow from
Mm.
that night, whatever happens, I'm gonna wake up and I'm gonna have eternal life in heaven, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And that was peace that I gained. But I still have the worldly stuff that I'm dealing with at the time, which is, hey,
Yeah.
like I'm dying.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
not fun. Things hurt. Like I can't eat. I would throw up
Mm.
water, and that was like what had started happening. So I part of me thought also like, hey, like I'm a Christian now. Like I'm here. Like things that God's going to save me, right?